I once rented a small studio apartment that seemed perfect on the first viewing. Cozy, cheap, and in a good location. The first night, I heard scratching noises in the kitchen. I thought it was the fridge, until I opened the cupboard and found a mouse staring at me like I was the intruder. Turns out, there was an entire mouse family living in the walls. I ended up naming the biggest one George and pretending he paid rent too. When I moved into a shared house, I noticed my bedroom door didn't lock. No big deal, right? Except one day, I came home from work, and my door was completely gone, just missing. I asked my landlord what happened, and he said, the hinges were squeaky, so I took it off to fix it. He didn't put it back for 2 weeks. Living without a door is an experience I wouldn't recommend. In one rental, every time I turned on the shower, it made a sound like a dying whale. A long, dramatic wail that echoed through the building. The first time it happened, my neighbor actually knocked on my door to ask if I was okay. The landlord's solution: just sing along to it. I once rented a beachside apartment. Sounds amazing, right? Except the windows had no screens, and the place was basically a 5-star hotel for mosquitoes. Every night, I went to bed feeling like I was under attack. By week 2, I was sleeping under a DIY mosquito net made from duct tape and an old bedsheet. I moved into a new place, and the landlord gave me 3 different keys. None of them worked. After 30 minutes of struggling at the door with all my boxes, a neighbor came out and asked if I was breaking in. Turns out, the landlord had given me the keys to an entirely different apartment in the building. I had been trying to open some stranger's door for half an hour. A friend of mine rented a cabin in the countryside. The first morning, she woke up to find a snake curled up in the corner of the bathroom. When she called the landlord in a panic, his response was, "Oh, yeah, he's harmless. He comes with the place." Needless to say, she moved out very quickly. I rented a place where the oven didn't work. The landlord said he'd fix it soon. 3 months later, I realized his idea of fixing it was just buying me a toaster oven and putting it inside the broken oven. He told me proudly, "Now you've got a pizza oven." I ate a lot of takeout that year. I once lived in an apartment that seemed fine during the day, but every night, as soon as the lights went off, cockroaches would march out like they were holding a secret rave party. I'd wake up to the sound of tiny legs scratching across the floor. When I complained, the landlord said, "They're part of the ecosystem." I didn't stay long. One rented a basement apartment, and the landlord lived upstairs. Sounds normal, right? Except he had a hole in the floor of his living room that looked directly into my kitchen. He claimed it was for ventilation. I called it what it was: a creepy spy hole. I started cooking only in sunglasses and a hoodie. In one place, every time I turned on the living room light, the microwave also turned on. If I tried to heat food and use the TV at the same time, the whole apartment's power would go out. The landlord told me it's an energy-saving system. Pretty sure it was just very bad wiring. When I moved into a furnished rental, the landlord proudly told me the bed was new and sturdy. On the very first night, I sat down to watch Netflix, and the entire frame collapsed underneath me like a Jenga tower. I ended up sleeping on the mattress on the floor for 2 months while the landlord searched for parts. He eventually just gave me 4 bricks to use as legs. In one apartment, the toilet wouldn't flush properly. Every time I tried, it made this loud gurgling sound and bubbled like a swamp monster. Once, the bubbling got so aggressive that water splashed out and soaked my socks. The landlord's solution: he gave me a plunger and said, "Consider it character building." I rented a place in winter that had 0 insulation. I could literally see my breath inside the living room. The heating didn't work, so the landlord brought me a single electric blanket and said, "Just bundle up." My shampoo actually froze in the bathroom. I was basically living in Narnia. In one shared house, the landlord used to call every single night around 10 p.m. to check if everything was fine. But he didn't ask normal questions. He'd ask if the fridge light worked, if the curtains were drawn, if we had brushed our teeth. It was less renting a room and more living with a long distance dad. I rented a cheap apartment that looked clean and tidy when I viewed it. But on the first night, I opened a kitchen cupboard and about 20 cockroaches sprinted out like athletes at the Olympics. When I called the landlord in horror, he said, "That's why the rent is low, free pets." I didn't even last a week there. My landlord loved to fix things himself. One day, the sink was leaking. Instead of calling a plumber, he taped a plastic bottle to the pipe with duct tape and said, "Problem solved." Another time, the oven door broke off, and he replaced it with a piece of plywood. The place slowly turned into a museum of bad DIY. I once lived in an apartment where the walls were so thin I could hear my neighbor sneeze like he was in my own room. I accidentally heard full conversations, phone calls, and even arguments word for word. The weirdest part, I once sneezed back at the same time as my neighbor, and we both shouted, "Bless you," in unison. The apartment came with an old fish tank as decoration. I thought it was empty, until one night I saw movement. Turns out, there was one very much alive and very grumpy fish still in there. I had unintentionally become a pet owner. When I asked the landlord about it, he just shrugged and said, "Oh yeah, that's Steve. He came with the place." In one rental, there was a giant spider web in the corner of the ceiling. I tried to clean it, but the spider was huge and very determined. After a while, I gave up and started calling him Greg. Greg lasted longer in that apartment than I did, and honestly, he paid more attention to the place than the landlord ever did. One morning, I woke up to find the living room wall painted a completely different color. At first, I thought I was losing my mind. Turns out, the landlord had let himself in while I was at work and experimented with paint samples without telling me. He said it gave the place more personality. I said it gave me trust issues. The landlord once advertised the bathroom as having a jacuzzi-style tub. Excited, I filled it up, pressed the button, and it made a loud clunk and spit out one sad bubble. Just one. The tub then shook violently for 5 minutes before shutting off. I sat there in lukewarm water, questioning all my life choices.